Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Dr. Ganz Ferrance. Dr. Ganz is a registered psychologist, a speaker, and a coach who is on a mission to provide practical, user-friendly, and down-to-earth advice, tools, and education that can help people manage their stress and build healthier relationships. Dr. Ganz was such a blast to have on, and I really want to thank him again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Also, if you watch Survivor, fair warning, this is a spoiler alert, but the winner of Survivor 42, Marianne, went to high school with her. Incredible person. I'm so proud of her. So, Marianne, no one deserves it more. Huge congrats. Honestly, I'm just blown away. You're really putting Whippy on the map, Sinclair on the map. Represent. I'm so happy for you. Like, seriously, huge congrats. No one deserves it more. And if you guys don't know who Marianne is, you better figure it out. Okay? She's on this trajectory to stardom, so hop on the bandwagon now. Now, before we get into the episode today, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. We're good to go. Dr. Ganz, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.
Of course. So my first question for you, what got you started? Like, what inspired you to become a psychologist in the first place?
Oh boy. Well, like so many people in the field, I had to figure out what was going on with me and my family and how I grew up, right? And it's like, okay, so I had some, rough parts of my upbringing, and my parents weren't always as functional and as healthy as they could be. And so, it wasn't always easy, and trying to figure out, okay, well, there's got to be a better way. What kinds of things, what do I need to know that's going to help me have a better life for myself, but also create a different sort of legacy for if I have kids. And I actually have 2 kids now, right? So, wanting to be a better parent, but also wanting to have better relationships with people around me and also with my spouse. But then there was also another part of me that really, I kind of want to see how good we can have it, right? And so this whole positive psychology, human potential thing was really, really interesting to me. The idea that, we've all heard the stories of, the mother whose kid gets trapped under a car, she lifts the car and, pulls out the kid. It's like, well, okay, how does that work? And like, how do we tap into that? How do we, or at least closer to that, instead of always having to struggle and having a hard time in our day-to-day lives? And so that whole piece of how good can we have it, and what are the best practices of happy, healthy, successful, high functioning people? If I can figure that out, practice those things, but then also, why not share them? Why not share them with other people so they can also be happy, healthy, and high functioning and productive too, right? And so that's why I got into it, and that's kind of been my strategy and my philosophy throughout the 30 plus years of being in the psychology field, and now in the coaching and the speaking field. This is what I like to talk about. I like to help people see, and like to help people kind of get switched on with that whole idea and see how good they can have it.
Right. Yeah. Why do you think that whole side of potential isn't as tapped, sorry, as like we would
Yeah.
prefer it to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the greatest things I find about humanity is we are easy to adapt. We're adaptable, right? We can adapt to a lot of different places, environments. That's why we're living all over the world, right? We talked about me living in Edmonton with the snow today, right? We can adapt to a lot of stuff, but that's also to some extent one of our greatest downfalls, is that we can adapt to negative stuff. So we've all heard, or some of us have lived, the story of when you're like living close to a busy road or an airport or a train track, or subway or whatever. After a while, you don't actually hear or notice the traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that although our brains, or that part of our brains, have adapted to hearing that, we just kind of block it out. physiologically they can test you and they can see that, no, your blood pressure goes up, your immune system is lower, right? You have all the indicators of physiological stress, even if you never even heard it, you never like paid attention to it. And I think this is one of the things. I think we habituate as humans to kind of crappy situations. We say, well, it's like, oh, everybody around me is complaining and they're miserable, so why should I be any different? I guess this is how it is. Okay, and we carry on. And we don't really have that idea that, oh, wait a second, I wonder if this could be better, right? My students, they kind of get sick of me saying this, but I say, you always want to ask yourself, is this working for me? Is this working for me? And by that question, it is like the self-awareness question, right? Is this actually good? Does this work for me? Does this make me happy? Does this get me what I want? This way of thinking, this pair of shoes, this relationship, this job, is it getting me what I want? As opposed to just sort of settling and kind of going along and never really asking the question. And so I think this is one of the reasons that we do get stuck, just kind of like muddling through, when it could be so much better with just a few little tweaks. We could have a very different experience.
Right. That question's it's been programmed that it's such a selfish question. Like I remember growing up and like being in high school, you'd have the odd person that goes, "Oh, okay, I don't want to do that. That doesn't
Mhm.
serve me." And everyone's like, "Check out the douche over here." You know what I mean? Like it was
Mhm.
just such a taboo thing.
Right, who's the princess? Well, thank you, your royalty, your highness, right? Yeah, you got to just be the way everybody else is, right? But no, you don't. That's the truth. And I get it. And unfortunately, our junior high, elementary, and high school experience kind of sets us up to not be as functional as we could be as adults, right? But the truth is, everybody has to walk their own path, and it's just because it works for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. you
Mhm.
know um I think about it just in terms of ice cream flavors. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so I don't know what the most popular flavor is, but chocolate, strawberry, I don't know, vanilla, right? But let's say I like pistachio, right? Okay, so like if I go and I want pistachio, no, you should like chocolate. Well, yeah, but I don't. Right? Just like I like pistachio. No, but chocolate's what everybody likes. But yeah, good. If you like chocolate, have chocolate. I want pistachio, right? And it's not really selfish. Well, it's not selfish at all. It's self-affirming, right?
Right.
It's one of my friends calls it selfful, right?
Mm.
And it's one of those things where when we are walking the path that we decide, we lay out for ourselves, we understand is unique and correct for us, we actually have fuel, right? One of my kids is a lifeguard, well, trained as a lifeguard, didn't actually work at it. But one of the first things they teach you is how to stay alive as a lifeguard. You have to, you can't drown while you're trying to save somebody who's drowning. Otherwise, you'll never save anybody again. And
Right.
so, is it selfish that the lifeguard has to stay alive in the presence of somebody else drowning? I mean, it gets to the point where if you're in the ocean and something's really bad and they're like grabbing onto you and trying to pull you down, you got to kind of knock them out, right?
Yeah.
To make sure you stay alive, because then at least you have a chance to pull them out and resuscitate them. Or when we go on the airplane, and I used to think this, right? When you're traveling, if you're traveling with small kids or somebody who needs help and the masks come down, make sure you put your own mask on first. Oh my goodness, that's so selfish.
Right.
But it only makes sense, because if you pass out, then you're both dead, right?
Mhm.
So I get where that comes from, but it's just a faulty way of thinking that we've just adopted.
Yeah. Do you know where that faulty thinking came from?
Sure. Well, but buckle up.
Let's
Well,
go.
you know what it is. So it's whether you consider yourself religious or not. Our Western culture is really very strongly influenced by the Judeo-Christian ethic, right? So it's the whole Protestant work ethic, especially in North America here. This idea that there's value in struggle. Hard work is its own reward. when you suffering, your reward is in the next life. Do you know what I mean? And the harder you suffer here, the more reward you get up there. There's and even if you never went to church, this is sort of built into the air. Do you know what I mean? And so
Right.
we kind of have that belief because we see everybody else having that belief, and that's how we grew up, and that's how we learn our values. We kind of catch them by whatever we're around. And so unless you're around some really enlightened, kind of free thinking people, you're going to pick up this way of approaching life because everybody else is doing it, and because everybody else is doing it, you figure, okay, well, the bigger, older people with more money, people who are in charge, they're all doing this, or at least they say they're doing this. So I guess this is the way we got to think and we got to be, right? And that's why, for me, I like people to really challenge that. And it's like, well, is there virtue in suffering, right? I used to hear my parents always say, like, eat your vegetables because there's starving people in Africa or Asia or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
if you want to pack up my vegetables and send them to them, like that's okay, because I don't know how my eating the vegetables is going to help that person over there who's starving, right? And
Right.
I know the whole thing is about be thankful, but my suffering here doesn't help somebody across the world to feel better, right? I just get to suffer. So there's a lot of faulty ways that we've been taught to think, or we've caught to think, right? And it's not only okay, it's very wise to start to challenge these things, especially once we're adults.
Right. On
Mhm.
the other side of that, or on the same side of that coin, I had a conversation with a psychologist, Melissa, and she was talking about how, it can be dangerous if you start comparing your trauma, your suffering, your misery to be, to the same idea. Like, oh, there's people starving in a different country, so I
Right.
shouldn't feel bad about my divorce or something.
Right. Right. No, exactly right. It's like, yeah, it's like, no, pistachio is better than chocolate. No, it's like they're just different, right? Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, you can't compare suffering. We don't want to get into the, you know, who's most downtrodden Olympics, right? And your own disappointment or hard time that you're having is significant to you, just like somebody else's hard time is significant to them. Sometimes we can get context. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Because some of us can, get a little bit like entitled and whatever and feel like, oh no, everything should go my way and my life should just be bunnies and unicorns all the time and stuff like
Right.
that, right? And so getting some context is not bad, but she's actually 100% right. You can't say, well, I shouldn't feel bad because there are people who were born without legs, or do you know what I mean? It's like,
Hmm.
yes, that is true. That's hard for them, and this is hard for me.
Right. Yeah. Now you said you work with students. How old are they?
Well, my coaching students, so not in a school, so it's more like, my coaching clients is
Oh,
that's
right.
what I meant by the students, yeah. Mhm.
How old are
So
they?
yeah, so basically, anybody who's an adult, basically. So I work with people who sometimes I work with younger people like teens, but generally it's people in their 20s and up to like 60, 70. I've had people anywhere in that range who, the general idea is they want to have a better life and they want to do better and manage their life in a more, I would say, deliberate and proactive way. And those are the people that I love to work with, and they seem to love to work with me too. So,
Right. Yeah. Now when you first start working with them, what's their initial reaction to like all of this? Saying like, yeah, you can go against the grain that you've grown up with for so long.
well, there is humans, excuse me, humans, we prioritize familiarity
Hmm.
even over optimization, right? So even if we're suffering, but it's familiar suffering, we're used to that. We know the rules of that game, right? And so getting into a better place, getting into a place that's functional and serving you better, even though we can intellectually know it, it's unfamiliar to us, right? And so we can feel a little weird. It can feel just, oh, this doesn't feel right, and then we sort of attribute, oh no, it's bad because I'm being selfish, or I shouldn't do this, or I'm gonna go to hell, or something, no one's gonna like me, or whatever, right? But
Hmm.
it's really just a change. It's just doing things that's out of procedure. So here's something that everybody can try. So I'd like you to try it too. Okay, so
Sure.
Just take your time and just, naturally cross your arms. Okay. So go ahead and do that. All right. So you didn't have a lot of problems doing that, right? It's easy to do. Cross.
Mhm.
Done it thousands of times. Okay. Now cross your arms the other way.
Oh, I don't like doing. I don't even know how to where do you even
Right.
put your hand?
What is this? Right? Okay. It feels weird, correct?
Right.
Okay. Is it morally wrong?
No, definitely not.
No, it's just different. But it feels so weird. It stirs up your body. It's like you don't know where to put your hands. How do I get to that place? That takes you way longer to do it, right? And so when I work with people, this is one of the first things we do is understand that when you change a well-worn procedure, a well-practiced procedure, it is going to feel wrong. It is going to feel weird, right? There's actually in education, there's four levels of learning or four levels of knowledge. And so the bottom level is what they call the incompetent, unconscious incompetent, right?
Hmm.
So you're unconscious about how incompetent you are. You don't know what you don't know, right? The next level up is, oh, wait a second, there's other stuff that I can do. You become conscious. So you're a conscious incompetent. So you don't know what you're doing, but at least you're conscious of it now, right? Then the next level up is the conscious competent. Okay, I know how to drive stick. I need to put the clutch in. I need to shift. I need to put the gas in. So you think your way through the process or whatever you're learning. And then the highest level is the unconscious competent. And what that is I'm shifting, I'm driving. I don't even remember shifting. I'm just doing it as natural. It's like breathing, right? And I'm doing that. I drove to where I needed to go and I didn't even remember shifting and I was eating a sandwich while I was doing it. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. But every new skill, you've got to go through those stages. And when, crossing your arms the way you're used to crossing them, you're an unconscious competent at doing that, right? Crossing your arms in the way that you're not used to, well, you're a conscious no, you're a conscious competent at doing that, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Man. So what are like the first processes to get people to get to that top of the board that you were talking about? Like how do they get from not knowing what they don't know to knowing what they know, or knowing what they don't know and just moving forward after that? Like is there a certain process that you follow?
Well, yeah, I mean, depending on where they want to go and what they want to do, the idea is that you want to identify what is not working for you, right?
Hmm.
Um, and once you identify what's not working for you, then let's figure out some things that would work better. And sometimes, I got to say this, sometimes things work, but they're not optimal, right? They'll work, but they don't work as well as something else could work, right? And having the mindset of, okay, it's not just good enough for me to get by. Let me see how I can optimize. And that's even that is a sort of a different mindset that people can develop, right? This idea of proactivity. So once they have that idea that, okay, things can be better, and it's not just I can look for things to be not just better than I've ever done them. What is the best they can actually be? How can I get to be really, really proficient at, managing my emotions or speaking to my spouse or my kids or whatever their thing is. And then once they do that and they say, okay, well, this is the skill we can work on. Now you can, once you have the idea that this is something that works, now you put into practice. So you can make the decision, but now you got to put into practice. So it's just as easy to cross your arms the other way as it is to cross your arms the natural way, the way you're used to, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so you work at that, but then you also work on the mindset. You work on managing the anxiety that comes up when you change your procedure.
Hmm.
One of the things, so I've had my own psychologist and my own coaches for the last about 30 years too. Like, so about as long as I've been in the field, I've had my own, I'm on the other end of the couch, so to speak, right? And so one of the things my psychologist told me about was practicing to do things out of procedure. So sometimes I'll walk at two-thirds my normal pace, right? Even now I'm speaking at about two-thirds my normal pace just to get a sense of what that's like.
Mm.
Or, I usually put my pants on right leg, left leg. So every now and then I'll put on left leg, right leg, right? I'll just do things that are just meaningless out of procedure and allow myself to feel the, this is weird, right? So I can get used to what it feels like when I break a procedure. So then when I break something that has a little more emotional loading to it, it's no big deal. I'm used to the weirdness, right? And it stops me from then ascribing, oh no, this is morally wrong, or this is not the way dad did it, or whatever other, head games I might play with myself.
Right, because that's the biggest thing when you're going through change is that whole, oh, I don't like this at all. And it, like, for me, it sometimes it would turn me back. I'd be like, you know what? I'm good, actually. I'll just
Mhm.
go back to that relationship that doesn't serve me at all.
Right. It's not worth the discomfort.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I tell people we get change back messages, right? We get change back messages from the environment, but we also have change back messages from internally, right? And the truth is, well, the analogy I use is like a spider web. If you can pull one of the strands of the spider web out of position, the whole web distorts, right? But there's
Hmm.
pressure on that one point that as soon as you let go of it, it's going to snap back into position, right? And this is what happens when we change a procedure. We're pulling the spider web of all the people we're connected with, all the routines we have, all that stuff. We're pulling everything out of position. But if we were able to hold that web out of position long enough, the spider would come along and do its thing and like repair the web, and that would be the new position of the web, right? And then you can let go and you'll be there. And that's what it is. If we can hold that position long enough, we can practice it, usually with support. I mean, that's why I've been having my own coaches and therapists for that long. When we have the support and we can hold that position long enough, we start to accommodate that. It starts to become the new position. And now everybody in our world knows us in this new way, and we know ourselves in this new way. And so it's a lot easier to stick with it. And we don't just kind of bounce back into that other thing that really wasn't working for us.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Do you have any because you've obviously worked with a wide array of people
Mhm.
throughout your work. Is there any like major success story that you have that you just are super proud of?
Well, me, right?
Right, of course.
Well, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that when I was younger, I had terrible, terrible performance anxiety. Used to get sick at tests, and I couldn't raise my hand in class. I'm talking about university. I'm not even talking about in grade school, right?
Yeah.
I remember I took a speech class. I really wanted to beat this. I took a speech class when I was in grade 11, and I had to end up dropping it because the first speech came about, and I had, there were 6 people in the class, and I had to give a speech, and I was throwing up. I had diarrhea. I was like, oh no, I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
So I stopped, and now I'm doing this, right?
Right.
And I do public speaking, I do media, and so I know that therapy and coaching and changing habits is possible, and it works, right? But I've also had, clients that I've seen for just a number of years or even for a short period of time who change the way they relate to their spouse, right? How they talk to their kids. Just even understanding that it is a wise and responsible thing to put your own mask on first. Just even having that clarity in their minds, and that knowing that it's okay to ask, is this working for me? And then make whatever adjustments you need to make sure it does work for you. Those are my biggest success stories. I love when we can do that. I can do that. I can be witness to that and help somebody get there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, man. I actually I feel pretty similar about the school thing. Like, because I think it was in elementary school, I answered a question and the teacher was just like, "That is so wrong, you dummy." And since
Oh no.
then, it was like, no way I'm ever asking a question again. Not a
Hmm.
chance.
Hmm. Geez, that was a crappy teacher, boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, this isn't related at all, but like, my French teacher in grade 9, she was like, "Do you know how to do long division?" And I was always bad at math, right?
Hmm.
And so I was like, "No, I don't," and I didn't care to learn. And
Hmm.
she's like, "You don't know?" And she was like, "Guys, guess what? Harry doesn't know how to do
Oh
long division."
no.
And
Oh no.
I was like, "This is French class." It was like one
Right.
of the first weeks of French in high school. It was grade 9. And
Oh no.
she had me come up to the board and she wrote a long division problem. I couldn't do it. It was something easy, I think, but
Yeah.
it scarred me. I was like,
Well, of course.
I'm never speaking again.
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is horrible, Harry. This is terrible. Yeah, but this is the thing. I mean, it's these intense kind of negative experiences, especially when you're young, have such a powerful effect on us, even when we go into adulthood, right? And unless we do something with those experiences and kind of put them in the right context and understand, okay, no, this was not about you, Harry. This teacher was crappy. She
Right.
was just awful, right? Shouldn't have been a teacher, right? Because that was abusive. That was really what that was, right? Even the elementary school, like, oh, that's so wrong. That's abusive. That's not what teachers are supposed to do, right? But we
Mhm.
also know that just like there are good and bad plumbers or doctors or whatever, they're good and bad teachers,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And you just happen to run into a couple of them. I ran into a few myself. We can trade war stories. But yeah, but it's yeah, but people with that kind of power should be much more mindful about, how they treat people, because they can really scar people for real.
I hope all those teachers are listening.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do penance, right?
Yeah, take that.
Yeah.
Um, moving on a little bit, was something another topic that I really wanted to get into was burnout. And,
Mhm,
obviously there's this big elephant in the room called the pandemic that's been going on for the last 2 years. Now,
mhm,
in your work, how have you noticed has there been
mhm.
a shift in terms of increased cases of burnout or stress with your clients and the people you work with?
100%. So not so much like the folks that I work with. The folks that have been working with me for a while, they honestly have come through this fairly well. They, a little bit of a dip, but because they were in the process of connecting with somebody and working with somebody, it didn't hit them, like, for the majority of them, very hard at all, right?
Mhm.
They One of the things I tell people is the best defense is a good offense. If you're working on your life and you're, kind of trying to move ahead generally, you're inoculated from stress better, you're more defended from these things that come up in the environment and stuff like that, right? So those folks were doing okay, but I did see a huge uptick in pretty much every negative measure. I mean, there were higher rates of, attempted suicides, higher rates of completed suicides, higher rates of depression, alcohol, drug abuse, spousal abuse, child abuse, like everything that you can imagine got worse during the pandemic, right? Because when you stress somebody or you stress a population, the things that were kind of either kind of being managed or hidden now start to pop to the surface, right? And people, if they don't have coping skills, they don't haven't they the either they don't have the resources or the supports or whatever, they're going to have to try to make ends meet some way. They got to try to figure out how to manage this, and a lot of times it's managed in a dysfunctional way. The pandemic in general was it's really weird. It's really weird because on one hand, we were having a hard time, but on the other hand, we still had Netflix and, Uber Eats and, that sort of thing, right? Like,
Right.
so it was this thing that was happening, but we had the creature comforts, but we didn't, it's just weird. And then one of the first things we look at when people are in stress is, what are your social supports? How connected are you with people? And because of the pandemic, you couldn't, right? So the
Mhm.
very thing that would help you get through it is the very thing that you couldn't do because it was dangerous. And so it was a very, very difficult time, and really still is a difficult time for a lot of people because of all that isolation, because of the uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of those things that is extremely difficult for humans to deal with, right? Because we like to have some control. We like to know what's coming, and the whole pandemic just shook everything upside down. And so it was an extremely stressful, and still is, like I said, an extremely stressful event in our personal history, but in human history. And yeah, so lots of people are feeling that sense of burnout. And by the way, we're already ramping up with burnout before the pandemic. Like,
Mm.
this was partially because we're having better conversations about it. A few years before the pandemic, the World Health Organization actually recognized burnout as a specific illness that happens with people. And so it's, it's now a compensatable illness, and, it's got some status, so to speak, right? So it was already happening. And then we hit the pandemic, right? And so you have that on top of what we already knew was happening, So yeah, it's there was a severe uptick once we had this COVID thing show up in our lives.
Now, was the burnout ramping up before the pandemic? Was that mostly caused because of the fact that we just never talked about it, or it was like frowned upon to just take breaks from work, or what was it?
Well, yeah. So there are lots of factors. We Even leading up to the pandemic, there was a lot of kind of global unsettling in, like, politically and with all sorts of other stuff that was happening, right?
Hmm.
But if you go back a couple decades, the whole, like, technology boom, when we went into the information age, you're too young, but back then in the 80s and 90s, we went into the information age. The promise was that life was going to get easier. It's going to give us more time with our families. You're going to, this whole paperless society and all this other stuff. It didn't really work out that way, right? It actually got busier, and we have more stuff. And then, before, you used to be, if you were, like, say, a first responder, you'd be on call. You get paid to be on call. You'd have to kind of be sort of ready, and they'd call you out, they'd pay you extra, right? With the advent of smartphones and social media, you're basically on call to everybody all the time, and you're not getting paid for it, right? Because your
Right.
alerts are going off all the time, and there's this feeling that there's this etiquette, you have to respond or look, or I got to be up on the news or whatever. So you can just kind of see the ramping up, the notching up of our anxiety, because all this information coming to us. I'm old enough to remember that if I wanted information, I'd have to go down and buy a newspaper, or I'd have to tune into the news or something, looking in encyclopedia, one of those old things, right? Now our goal, our job is not to look and seek information. Our job is to filter the information that's coming at us and bombarding us all the time. But technology has advanced so quickly, our society's understanding and our sort of social conventions and mores that we'd normally haven't evolved as fast. And so the technology is ramping up, and we can't figure out what do we do with it. I mean, it's a cool new thing. Should I just engage? How many likes do I get? I got to be on, whatever, right? And all that adds to your stress. There are a number of studies that have shown that with kids in particular, and the same holds true for adults, um, the more screen time you have, the more anxious you become, the more depressed you become, the more sort of like bullying and antisocial you become. All that stuff is undone when you turn off the screens and you go out in nature. Nature undoes all of that stuff.
Mm.
In addition to that, they've done these studies where they use functional MRI. So they're looking at your brain and in real time. And so when you're using some of these, like, platforms and some of the equipment, some of the physical equipment like smartphones, the parts of your brain that light up are the same parts that light up when you're on heroin, right? So your brain has the same kind of response, same kind of addictive response, same kind of endorphin and dopamine response that you do when you're using really hard drugs. So there's all of these factors combined with workers or employers expecting more work with less time, with fewer staff, and you know what I mean. So there's all these societal forces that are kind of adding stress to us that really do help to drive that curve of mental health issues and burnout and things like that. It was a f- quite a few years ago now. The percentage of workplace injuries that were compensated by insurance companies changed from physical injuries to emotional injuries. So
Mm.
that it crossed that. So we have more emotional injuries in the workplace now, like, burnout and anxiety, depression, alcoholism, whatever it is, than we do physical injuries now, right? So it has been ramping up for a while, and like I said, then you throw let's throw the pandemic on top of that just for good measure, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's like throwing a Mento in a Coke bottle.
That's right.
It is interesting though, like the whole how your brain reacts the same to heroin as it does when you're on your phone, because when you get off your phone, if you've been on it for a while, you can feel it. You feel
Mhm,
the come down.
mhm.
It's so strange.
It's weird. Like last night, I was with my son and we're watching some basketball. Right, the playoffs are on, and
Yup.
my phone was running out of running out of juice. Right, and he had the charger by him. So I said, "Can you just charge my phone? Just plug it in?" And I'm like, oh, where's my phone? What? And it's like I'm not a big phone guy. I know this stuff, and I try to really manage it. But I'm like, I felt weird. It's like crossing your arms the wrong way. Where's my phone? That's oh, let me look up my oh wait, I can't. Where's right? And it was just this weird feeling of of not being connected. And so yeah, it's a real phenomenon. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a chemical thing that we're addicted to. We can be addicted to a process or, in this case, a piece of equipment.
Hmm. The other problem is that, like, you mentioned already that sometimes, when there's trauma or there's something catastrophic that
Mhm.
happens, we go towards our social circle, and then in the pandemic, we weren't able to. Well,
Mhm.
with the phone, you were kind of able to, not in a
Right.
great way, but you were kind of able to. So now that we're
Right.
out of it, quote unquote, who knows? But now that
Mhm.
we're out of it, we're still almost dependent on that social circle as opposed to going out and seeing people.
Yeah, in real time. Yeah, yeah. It's true. And this is one of the things that this is sort of I guess the undoing or the deprogramming that we all have to go through as things start to change is how do we reestablish actual social connections? Because with social media, it it's really good to stay in like surface contact with people, especially around the world. It's brilliant for that, right? It's just during this time we're more broadly connected than we've ever been in human history, but we're also less deeply connected than we've been in human history. And that was before the pandemic, right? So now the pandemic, like you said, we couldn't. So this we had to rely on the social media and the technology to do it. And so it is really going to be that idea of in a sense being very deliberate and conscious about stepping back out to connect with real humans in real time as opposed to sitting back with the comfort of our phones or our computers and thinking that that's going to fill our needs. This is part of the problem. Well, look, with any drugs feel good, right?
Hmm.
But they also do a lot of other damage that don't feel as good as living a good life. And so it can feel good to have that momentary hit of, well, I connected with so and so, or I know what's going on with this other person over here, but it doesn't fill you the same way. But if you think you are filled, but you still have that hole, then this is where you get that angst happening. It's like, I don't know, I feel irritable and I don't know what's wrong with me, or I can't sleep, and right. And you have all these weird symptoms that you don't really associate with kind of what you're doing in your life. But this is exactly where this is coming from.
Right. How can people kind of get to that point of getting out of the phone, out of the surface value into more meaningful conversation? Because we mentioned it time and time again in this episode, is like, once you identify the problem and you're starting to do that work, it gets very uncomfortable and it
Yeah.
gets very, it doesn't feel normal. And after 2 years of, oh,
Hmm.
I'll text them, I'll DM them, I'll shoot, I'll send them a TikTok. I don't know, whatever
Right.
everybody's doing, but it's gonna feel really weird.
It is going to feel weird. And you have to just understand that. And this is I'm not a big subscriber of this particular saying, but in this case it makes sense. No pain, no gain, right?
Mm,
No pain, no gain. So look at it's going to be weird and it's going to feel gross for a while, and it's better for you on the other side, right? I think of it, any change is like this is two analogies that work for me is like spring cleaning. So when I'm spring cleaning, my house is probably all right. It's okay. You know what I mean? Not too ashamed to have people come over. But when I'm done, it's awesome. It's clean. It feels clean. I'm very happy. But if somebody shows up in the middle, right, when place is all ripped apart, it's gross, right? It's got the curtains down. I'm sweaty. I'm finding the dust bunnies behind the couch, right? It looks gross. But you can't get to that higher level unless you go through the middle. And the middle is where the chaos is, right? And where it
right.
feels uncomfortable. But if you know the goal and you understand that it's temporary, It's just really putting one foot in front of the other and getting going, right? So that's one analogy I use. The other one that works for me is the baby learning to walk, right? So majority of us have figured this out. Okay, so we're walking, right? But when we were starting, this is how it went. You'd crawl around, you'd maybe hold on to a piece of furniture, you'd be unstable, you'd look and there's something over on the other side of the room you want to get to, and you take a step or two, and then you're on your butt, right? Now, if the baby was like an adult, they'd be down there and say, oh, I guess this walking thing's not working. Okay, I'll just go back to crawling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're not. They're like, okay, I understand. I'm just going to get up, take a few more steps, boom, I'm on my butt. Get up, take a few more steps, boom, I'm on my butt. After a while, I walk more than I fall, right? But I still fall. I fell this winter a few times, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I did not say, I guess the walking thing didn't actually take after 50 years, right? It's like, no, I just fell. No big deal. Get up, keep going, right? So it's the same sort of thing. So when you want to get out and you understand that it's actually healthier for you to connect with real live people to build that muscle again. And that muscle is going to build a lot faster because you already built it before, right? But yeah, at first it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel gross. It's going to feel uncomfortable. You're not going to know what to do with your hands, right? Not going to know how to make small talk. But it's okay. Just work with it. It'll come back to you, and you actually get better at it than you were before. But you won't if you don't try, right? If you don't try, you can guarantee that you won't get better. And that's just something that we have to remember. Put in the time. Most habits, they say on average, to change a habit, to create a better habit, takes about 66 days, depending on what the habit is. I like to say, it's, I overshoot it. So I say, I give myself 6 months. So if I say, give me 6 months to build this habit back, it's okay. If I screw up a little bit, I'm a little awkward, or I chicken out sometimes or whatever, no big deal. Cause I'm building a habit. It's not a goal that I have to hit. It's not a target. I'm just building a habit. And every time I do it, I get a little bit better. When I screw up, I learn from it and I try again the next time. Just, the baby learning to walk. That's the approach we need to have to any change we want to make.
Right. I love that, because when we were actually getting reintroduced to people and going back in person, I felt like a
Yeah.
baby learning how to walk. Yeah, especially when the masks came off, because
Oh yeah.
your mask's on, you can talk to yourself, you can kind of make facial expressions. No one knows what the
Mm-hmm.
heck you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because I'm a swim coach, so sometimes kids will
Oh
say
yeah.
something and I'm just mouthing like, what the hell are they talking about? Right? But then when they come off, they can see it. And so
Oh no, you can't see that. All right.
yeah, it's such a weird transition, and it feels so
Yes.
uncomfortable, but it's obviously worth it.
Oh yeah, totally. I went out. I met somebody for lunch a little while ago, and it's like I forgot. Like I'm wearing pants again, and like it's like okay, and it's like all right. And how do I like? Do we shake hands? Do we hug? What do we do? Like how do we do this? Right? And I like literally I had to think my way through the small talk, and it's like oh yeah, okay, all right, but yeah, whatever. Everybody's in the same boat. We're all kind of like disabled in that way for now, but it's a temporary thing, right? We're gonna get better at it.
Yeah, I think that's the one beautiful thing, is that it's not just a handful of us that are going through it. It's like everyone, when they get into that social circle, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm just gonna own it. Yeah, I'm gonna be weird for a while. Just whatever.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
Especially if you've been, because this happened to me as well, is like I've obviously met a ton of people with this platform, and
Mhm.
it's amazing. But I met someone that was on my show. I met them in
Mhm.
person for the first time, and we had been going back and forth for almost a year and a half. And
Mhm.
I see her in person, and I'm like, I don't even know what to say. I'm like, Are you real?" it's, it's like, wait, where's the
Yeah, I
screen?
know. You just like can you put a box around you? Yeah.
So I feel more comfortable.
Oh, it's true. It's true. It's just like, like you see somebody in a certain context, you see them in a totally different context. It's like you don't recognize them. It's like what, I was I went a couple weeks ago, I went to donate blood, right? And it was like the station was down at the university, and my oldest child was at the university, and she was with her friends, and they were in the restaurant. I walked by because I was meeting a friend of mine at a restaurant next door, and she's like like just confused because like it's like what's going on, like what are you doing here? I just like you live at home, like you don't live at the university. This is my space, right? So it's just it was just this weird thing, right? But yeah, this is the joy of life. This is, and if you can laugh at yourself and you just, it's okay, don't take yourself too seriously, and we'll all get better at it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about your new program, Money Mind DNA. What is it, and like what inspired you to create it?
Well, so it's myself as a partnership with two other gentlemen, right? So our DNA guy is Dr. Mikolai Rajic, and he's a DNA specialist. He's a geneticist, and so he is all about looking after your health generally. So just so many really cool advances with the DNA and DNA testing. So with his part of things, what he does, he can help parents, if they're wanting to conceive, know kind of what the risks are ahead of time.
Mm,
But not just with the pregnancy, you can actually figure out what are your risks for something coming up in the future, and kind of plan for that. And a lot of times, if you know that there's a tendency towards something, if you change your behavior, you actually may never actually show up with that tendency. It may never actually manifest, right? But you
mhm.
can also set up your finances to plan for stuff. You can get insurances in place and different things like that. But the really cool part for me is that with genetic testing now, you can really dial in your medication. So really, really good with cancer medication to figure out what your particular body is going to respond to if you need to take cancer medication, or heart and cardiovascular medication, but also with like psychoactive medication like the antidepressants, anti-anxieties. And what this they've dialed it in so well that they can tell you, no, this one might actually be toxic for you. This one you need to take, double the dose that's recommended because you tend to process it through your body faster. This one would work really well for you. Like, can really dial it in. So it's just fascinating information that he presents. And then our other partner is Charlie Fatale, and what he does, he's a money expert, he's a financial advisor, and he helps people. Like, if you know that you have a tendency towards something, maybe you get some insurance, and it can help people understand that whole world of finances, and understanding how to make finances work for you. How, what does investment look like? A lot of people think you got to have $1 million to get in there, 100,000 or whatever. No, $10, right? But
Mm.
you need to know what you're doing, and all the different terms. What is a TFSA, and what is a sheltered account, and all these different things. And so, what I know from the psychology world is that money is the number one cause of stress in individuals' lives. And it's also number one cause of stress and tension in couples. And so when you can have that money discussion, you reduce your stress, you reduce your, just the anxiety and everything you have that's negative for your mental health. And then, we know that stress causes problems with your physical health. And so we wanted to give a nice package where you deal with your financial health, you deal with your physical health, and then you work with your emotional well-being, your mental health, and the mindset that it takes to put all that stuff together. And so we came together to do these educational programs, and we're targeting businesses, right? Businesses and business leaders, because we know that when like a happy workforce is a productive workforce, when your people are happy, they know that the company cares about them enough to educate them on what is going to help them move forward and have a better life for them and their families. You have lower turnover, you have fewer injuries actually happen, you actually have more loyalty to the company and higher productivity. So it's a really, really good investment for companies to do that. So our free events, people come in, and they're open to the public as well. It doesn't You don't have to be a business owner or manager to attend, but you come to the free event, you learn about the basics of what we do, you meet all three of us, get a sense of who we are. And if you want to go further, we have a 6-week program that you can actually purchase, and we work with you for 6 weeks to help you go deeper with that. And then after that, we also have some more concierge type services that people can look into for their own benefit, or the benefit of their employees if they have a business. And so that's kind of what we do.
It's interesting because you hear about programs with all three individually or with the DNA and the mental separately from the financial, but you just explained it. There's such a big link between all
Mhm.
three that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it is. And, it's one-stop shop, right? And so it's really convenient. But, when you understand the linkages, then you can understand how everything works synergistically together, right? And the nice thing is all of this, and especially my part being coming from the world of psychology, people tend to think of this as something that's reactive, right? Like, well, you got a problem, you go see a shrink, right? And
Hmm.
hopefully they don't tell you you're not sane or whatever, right? um so there are a lot of misconceptions, but really what it is this all this stuff is proactive. It's about how good can you stand it. Let's get in early, let's prevent some stuff, let's figure out some things, and let's set you up for success, as opposed to seeing you as broken and trying to fix you, right? We don't want to fix you from being broken. We want to enhance your life to see let's see how far we can go, right? And we know that the earlier you get in and the more proactive you are, the better the investment, right? You spend less time, you spend less money, and everything works out better. You get more bang for your buck when you're proactive than if you're reactive.
Right. Yeah, that well that's the other idea, right? Is you have to be reactive with mental health stuff is oh, you can only go get therapy when you're down in the dumps. It's kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning where it's like you need to struggle and then
Right.
succeed. You can't just right out of the gate feel comfortable with what you have or feel good with what you have. You have to
Right.
struggle first. It's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing.
Exactly. It's a flip in the mindset, right? It's like, no. And even if you're struggling, it's okay. That's just your starting point. Let's see how good you can get it,
Mm.
right? So it's okay, right? We can all do better. And that's where it is. It's about enhancing your life as opposed to fixing something that we think might be broken, right? There's nothing's broken. We all struggle. Nobody gets out unscathed, right? So we all have stuff that we could work on and be better.
Right.
So that's the way I see it.
I love it. Where can my viewers find you and the program and all of your work?
So Mind Money DNA, mindmoneydna.com, I think it is. It might be in the notes they sent you. Is where people can find out more about our program. For me, it's askdrgans.com. So ask DRGANZ, since we're in Canada, .com. And you can go there and yeah, there's my website. You can check out a whole bunch of stuff. And if you're really interested, I have a whole free set of, like, I've got 12 stress busting strategies that you can sign up for that are free. No commitment necessary. But that's at askdrgansvip.com. So it's askdrgansvip.com. And people can get in there, and it's really the nuts and bolts stuff that help you manage stress, set yourself up for more success. And if you stick around with the program, you can actually, there's an Ask Dr. Gans kind of little program we're running where you can submit questions. And every week I pick a question, I answer it, and you get answers to really some really cool stuff. It's a nice way to stay connected in a proactive way with some of this material.
I love it. I'll put those links down below. Before we let you go, Dr. Gans, first of all, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be able to talk to you and your listeners.
Absolutely. Now, before we let you go, if you had anything to say to someone who may be listening who is definitely feeling the effects of burnout or stress or
Mhm.
depression or anything, n- maybe before the pandemic, but then after is feeling them to an excruciating level, like what would be one thing that you'd want them to hear right now?
Go get help. Don't do it alone. You don't have to do it alone, and you're not alone. Like I have, like I said, I've seen my own psychologist. I got coaches. I got a whole team keeping me together. Okay, so it's not weakness to go get help. It's actually strength to seek out people who can help us. Uh, the most brilliant heart surgeon would be an idiot to try to operate on his or herself, right?
Right.
Not because they don't have the skill, they don't have the objectivity. And this is the truth. We don't have the objectivity into our own selves because we're in the middle of ourselves. We need somebody else that can help us. You can't save yourself from drowning. This whole idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps defies physics. Okay. Doesn't happen. So you don't have to do it alone. You can and should seek out help. The other thing I would say, when you're seeking out help, seek out help early. Okay. Don't wait till you're bleeding from the eyes, right? Two, shop around. Not everybody is the same. Not everybody is pistachio ice cream, right? Not, you're not going to connect with everybody the same way. It doesn't mean they're bad or you're bad. It just means there might not be a good connection. And working with somebody at a coaching level or at a therapy level is a very somewhat intimate, connection. You need to be able to feel comfortable. You need to feel safe. You need to be able to trust them. And just because somebody has a degree or works with a certain population doesn't mean they're right for you. Again, going back to that question, is this working for me? It might not work for you, and that's okay. Keep shopping, right? Make sure there's a good fit. And then once you connect with somebody, then you can kind of dig in and get the work done that you need to do. But the earlier that you go, the easier it is. The less damage you have to endure, and just the more bang for the buck you get.
Right. I love it. Mic drop, boom. All my listeners, I will see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.